You are welcome to leave Apex, but let us be completely honest with each other. Nobody hires a 54-year-old manager who peaked a decade ago. Gavin Thorne did not just say those words to me in private. He said them at exactly 5 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, standing at the head of the polished mahogany conference table in the main glass boardroom of Apex Global Logistics. He said them in front of 7 junior managers, under 30, who immediately looked down at their laptops to avoid eye contact. My name is Timothy Miller. For 18 years, my title had been Director of Systems Operations. I earned that title through 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, and 2 decades of keeping their massive supply chain running without a single disruption. Minutes earlier, I had walked in and placed my formal resignation on the table, giving a standard 2 weeks' notice. I did not raise my voice, simply stating that my time at Apex had come to a natural end. Gavin did not pick up the paper to read it professionally. Instead, he picked it up with 2 fingers, held it in the air like a dirty napkin, and laughed out loud. He asked if it was a joke. The junior managers offered nervous giggles. He pointed at the paper, saying my salary was $160,000 and that a fresh graduate could run my division for $80,000. He told me my legacy systems were outdated and that I was replaceable inventory, plain and simple. He dropped the paper back onto the glossy wood. The slap of the paper sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. My hands were relaxed at my sides, though my blood was boiling inside. But 18 years in operations taught me that if you lose your temper, you lose your power. I let him speak, showing everyone in that room exactly who he was. Gavin leaned forward, putting his weight on his hands. He was 32, with a family-funded tailored suit and an elite business degree that taught him buzzwords, but nothing about real cargo logistics. He only held the senior vice president title because his father sat on our board of directors. "I will tell you what I am going to do," Gavin said, sliding the letter back to me. He said he would leave the letter here and give me until sunrise tomorrow to retract it. He told me to think about my age and mortgage, warning that if I did not apologize by 6 in the morning, I was done. No severance, no references, nothing. He turned back to his laptop, dismissing me. I folded my paper and walked out without another word. Walking back to my office, I knew Gavin saw me as an overpaid relic who spoke softly and wore simple suits. What he failed to realize was that I kept Apex Global Logistics alive. For 18 years, I had managed Customs Core, the internal software engine I built from scratch that routed over $400 million in daily freight through 5 regional ports. Every cargo ship arriving from overseas, every tractor trailer idling at a border terminal, and every automated customs declaration relied on Customs Core to clear legal inspections. To Gavin, the system looked automatic, just green check marks on a screen. But software is only as good as the reality behind it. International shipping laws change constantly. Port authorities update their safety rules without warning. To keep $400 million moving every single day without getting hit by millions in federal fines, I had personally created custom administrative fail-safe protocols. These protocols were not written in any standard instruction manual. They relied on special security validation keys that were tied directly to my personal executive security profile. Whenever a port system threw a high-level error code at 2 o'clock in the morning, Customs Core did not run an automated script. It pinged my personal terminal, requiring my specific administrative authority to verify the cargo manifests and clear the hold. I was the invisible backbone of the entire firm. I worked 60 hours a week, every week for nearly 2 decades. While young executives like Gavin took credit for our rising profit margins during public shareholder calls, I was the one sitting in dark computer rooms making sure our ships were not impounded by coastal border guards. I did not work these grueling hours out of blind corporate loyalty. I did it because my family needed the stability. I was the sole provider for my family. My daughter Lily is 21 and living with a complex chronic health condition that requires specialized medical treatments not fully covered by basic insurance. My mother lives in a quiet, high-quality assisted living facility 3 miles from my house, where the monthly care fees rise every single year. For years, my salary of $160,000 was the only wall standing between my family and complete financial disaster. I swallowed my pride when younger men were promoted over me. I stayed silent when my ideas were stolen and presented by regional directors who could barely read a ledger. I put my head down and did the work because my family needed the security. Gavin assumed my financial responsibilities made me weak. He thought my age and my family obligations meant he could push me around, insult my dignity, and cut my authority whenever he pleased. He believed I was trapped. What Gavin never understood was that a man who has spent 18 years solving catastrophic supply chain crises under pressure does not panic when threatened. He plans. And as I sat down at my desk to look at my screen one last time, I knew that the very system Gavin dismissed as outdated was about to show him exactly what my absence looked like. The arrogance that exploded in the boardroom had been building for 6 painful months. It all started when Gavin Thorne was appointed Senior Vice President of Operations. His father, a major shareholder with a seat on the board of directors, pushed the promotion through, despite Gavin having less than 4 years of real industry experience. Gavin arrived at Apex with a shiny business degree, a rack of expensive suits, and a desperate need to prove he was a visionary. He did not spend his first month learning how our port network functioned. He did not sit with the logistics coordinators or read our compliance manuals. Instead, he announced a sweeping plan to modernize operations and cut overhead costs by 20% across the board. Gavin's idea of modernization was entirely cosmetic. He brought in expensive outside tech consultants who built flashy, colorful digital dashboards that looked incredible in board presentations but were functionally useless for real-world shipping crises. To fund these visual upgrades, Gavin systematically dismantled my department. He stripped me of my budget authority and slashed my team's overtime pay. By doing this, he forced experienced systems engineers to quit. He then unilaterally laid off several senior programmers without providing the mandatory 60 days of written notice, required under the Federal Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, also known as the Warner Act. Under Title 29 of the United States Code, Section 2101. When I submitted detailed written memos warning him that these sudden layoffs violated federal labor laws and left us vulnerable to major border clearance failures, Gavin did not even read them. He reassigned my remaining staff to build an artificial intelligence portal for his favored mentee, a 25-year-old analyst who did not know the difference between a bill of lading and a customs duty waiver. In staff meetings, Gavin openly cut me off whenever I brought up operational compliance. He would smile condescendingly and tell the room that Timothy is stuck in the past or that legacy managers always fear dynamic innovation. The breaking point arrived 3 weeks before my resignation. A massive regulatory update was issued by international maritime authorities regarding real-time manifest verification. It required a custom code patch in Customs Core to keep 3 major ocean terminals synchronized. I flagged the danger immediately and requested emergency developer hours to push the update through. Gavin refused the request on the spot. He accused me of trying to inflate my department's budget to justify my high salary. He canceled the maintenance window and assigned his protege to handle the compliance paperwork using an unverified third-party software trial. To make matters worse, during my annual performance review that Friday, Gavin gave me the lowest rating of my 18-year career, citing my resistance to modern executive strategy. 2 days later, at the quarterly operational briefing, Gavin presented a massive cost efficiency report to the regional directors. Every single positive metric in that report was built on the back of my team's grueling, unpaid weekend labor. Gavin took full credit for the numbers, publicly thanking his young protege, while ignoring me entirely as I sat at the far end of the table. Looking at him standing there, basking in applause he did not earn, something fundamental shifted inside me. I realized that my loyalty to Apex was no longer a virtue. It was a form of slow self-destruction. I had spent nearly 2 decades protecting a company that allowed an arrogant, inexperienced executive to treat institutional knowledge as an obstacle. Gavin believed he was untouchable because of his father's name. He believed the company ran on slick slide decks and executive buzzwords. I decided right then that it was time to let him discover what actually held the building up. I walked back into my corner office, closed the door quietly, and pulled a clean cardboard box out from beneath my desk. The building was almost completely empty now. It was 5:45 in the afternoon, and the pale evening light filtered through the rain-streaked windows, casting long shadows across my workspace. I packed my personal items with slow, deliberate precision. A small framed photograph of my daughter at her high school graduation, a brass desk clock given to me for my 10-year milestone, a small potted fern that had survived 8 years on my windowsill. I did not print out proprietary files. I did not download trade secrets onto a flash drive. I had no interest in corporate theft or petty sabotage. The power I held did not belong to a stolen document. It resided entirely inside my head, built over 18 years of solving problems no one else even knew existed. At 6 o'clock, as I taped the box shut, my door swung open. Gavin was standing in the doorway, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up in a calculated display of busy executive power. Gavin looked at the box, then at me, an amused smirk playing on his lips. He walked over to my desk, pulled my folded resignation letter from his pocket, and slid it across the clean surface. He told me it was my last chance. He said if I signed a full retraction right now and accepted a 20% pay adjustment to align with the new operational structure, he would let me keep my desk. He warned me that if I carried that box past the security desk, my corporate access would be revoked immediately. My pension matching would stop tonight, and he would personally make sure my name was flagged across every logistics recruitment network in the state. I looked down at the paper, then looked up into his eyes. I felt no fear. I felt no panic. The 18 years of anxiety, the weight of keeping this company afloat while being treated as invisible, simply vanished, replaced by a cold, quiet clarity. "You are making a massive administrative mistake, Gavin," I said calmly. He snorted, throwing his head back in a short laugh, and asked if that was a threat. "No," I replied softly, placing my hands on top of my box. "It is an operational fact. Reality always arrives much faster than you expect." I did not wait for his response. I picked up my box, walked past him into the hallway, and headed toward the glass elevators. He called out after me, his voice echoing off the empty corridor walls, telling me I would be begging for my job back before the week was over. I did not look back. Down in the main lobby, the security guard, a kind man named Walter, who had worked the front desk for 12 years, looked at my box with wide, worried eyes. I handed him my corporate identification badge and master security key card. He swallowed hard, asking if I was sure about this. I gave him a gentle smile, thanked him for his years of kindness, and stepped out through the automatic doors into the cool, rainy evening air. At 6:15, in the evening, I sat in the driver's seat of my car, in the quiet parking lot. Rain tapped rhythmically against the windshield. I opened my personal tablet and completed 2 administrative tasks. First, under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, I formally revoked my personal digital signature licensing agreement. This was a legal safety agreement I had personally drafted and copyrighted, which permitted Customs Corps to use my private digital signature validation algorithms for emergency clearance overrides. Second, I unlinked my personal cell phone from the Apex Enterprise servers, switching my device to completely offline mode. The sudden silence in the car was overwhelming. For 18 years, my phone had buzzed every 20 minutes with urgent terminal alerts, cargo updates, and port queries. Now the screen was blank. The weight of leaving my career behind washed over me, but it was instantly followed by a deep, liberating sense of peace. I started the engine, backed out of the space, and pulled onto the main road. I drove to a quiet diner, 2 miles away, parked under a warm street lamp, pulled out my personal phone, and dialed a private number I had kept in my contacts for 3 years. It was time to make the call that would change everything. By 11 o'clock that evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. The house was completely quiet. Outside, the rain had turned into a steady, soft mist. My personal tablet sat open in front of me, its screen illuminating the dark room. I dialed the direct line for Eleanor Sinclair, the Chief Executive Officer of Summit Freight. Summit was Apex's primary, most aggressive market competitor. For 3 long years, Summit had been trying to beat our cross-border clearance speeds, but they had never been able to match our turnaround times at the regional ports. Eleanor picked up on the second ring. Timothy. Eleanor's voice came through clear and sharp, instantly alert despite the late hour. She said she did not expect to see my name on her private line at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. "Good evening, Eleanor," I said, keeping my voice measured and calm. "I am calling to let you know that as of 6:15 this evening, I am no longer employed by Apex Global Logistics. My resignation is effective immediately, and I have fully severed my technical and operational ties with the firm." There was a sudden, heavy pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of papers as Eleanor sat up in her chair. She asked if I was telling her that Gavin Thorne actually let me walk away. "He did not just let me walk," I replied quietly. "He mocked my resignation, called me replaceable inventory, and threatened to ruin my reputation across the region if I did not apologize by sunrise." Eleanor let out a long, incredulous whistle. She said the absolute arrogance of that young man was staggering, and that he had no idea what he had just thrown away. I made one thing clear to Eleanor right away. I told her I wanted to be transparent, and that I was not calling to sell her Apex's client lists, nor was I offering to trade confidential corporate secrets or stolen proprietary files. I told her that was not how I operated. "Of course not," Eleanor said firmly. She said she did not need their files, but that she needed me, my mind, my compliance record, and my 18 years of direct relationships with the regional port directors. She called me the actual engine behind Apex's operational success, stating that everyone in the industry with half a brain knew it. While we spoke, my personal tablet chimed with an automated industry notification. An internal alert from the Regional Port Authority Logistics Network showed up on my feed. Apex's primary automated terminal system, Customs Core, had just thrown a critical Level 4 authentication error at the main container terminal because my personal digital signature had been revoked. When I unlinked my account under federal copyright protection, the system could not verify the high-priority cargo manifests arriving on 3 massive ocean freighters. Gavin had assumed the system ran on autopilot. He had no idea that at 11 o'clock every night, Customs Core required my personal administrative key to clear those manifests for morning distribution. Without that clearance, those ships could not unload a single container. Eleanor saw the same industry alert on her monitor. She chuckled softly and said they were already stalling, and that Gavin probably thought it was just a minor internet hiccup. "He will figure it out soon enough," I said quietly. Eleanor then asked me about my non-compete clause. She knew Apex made all senior directors sign non-disclosure and non-compete agreements. I smiled into the dark room. I explained that when Gavin restructured our operational salary packages 3 months ago to cut costs, he forced us to sign new employment templates prepared by his father's legal team. In his rush to strip away our tenure bonuses, his lawyers made a critical legal error. They failed to include standard non-compete restrictions for departing senior staff, making the new contract supersede all previous agreements. I told her I was completely free to work anywhere I chose, starting right now. Eleanor laughed out loud, calling it poetic justice. She told me she wanted me in her office at 5:30 tomorrow morning so we could draft a contract before the sun comes up. At 5:30 in the morning, the first gray light of dawn was just breaking over the city skyline as I pulled into the executive parking garage at Summit Freight headquarters. The building was a sleek, modern tower of glass and steel, gleaming quietly in the early morning air. I rode the elevator up to the top floor, where Eleanor Sinclair was waiting for me in her office. A pot of fresh coffee sat on her glass desk alongside 2 copies of a legal agreement prepared by Summit's head of legal affairs over the past 4 hours. Eleanor offered me a chair and pushed the document across the desk, telling me to read it carefully. I put on my reading glasses and reviewed the terms line by line. The contract appointed me as Senior Vice President of Global Logistics Operations at Summit Freight. The base salary was $280,000 a year, nearly double what I had been making at Apex. It included a substantial signing bonus, full comprehensive health coverage that would completely cover my daughter Lily's specialized medical care, and a guaranteed performance bonus tied directly to terminal efficiency metrics. Most importantly, it granted me full, unchallengeable authority over regional compliance and systems architecture. There were no games, no condescending remarks, no subtle hints that my age was a liability. Eleanor viewed my 18 years of experience not as a relic of the past, but as a vital executive asset. I told her it was very generous. "It is not generous, Timothy," she replied, leaning forward with deep respect in her eyes. She said it was what my work had been worth for the last 10 years, and that Apex was simply stealing the difference from me. At precisely 6 o'clock in the morning, as the sun officially cleared the horizon and painted the office walls in warm gold, I put my pen to the paper and signed both copies of the contract. The moment my signature was finalized, Summit's media relations team pushed an official press release out to every major corporate logistics wire service and industry news portal across the country. The headline was bold and impossible to miss. Summit Freight appoints former Apex Operations Director Timothy Miller as Senior Vice President of Global Logistics. At that exact second, my private cell phone, which I had kept on silent in my pocket, began vibrating incessantly on the glass table. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. There were 9 missed calls, 4 text messages, and 3 urgent voicemails, all received within the last 20 minutes. Every single one of them was from Gavin Thorne. His first text message, sent at 5:15 in the morning, had been arrogant, telling me my childish point had been made and that I should return to the office by 6 o'clock or face immediate termination. His second text, sent at 5:40 in the morning, was noticeably different, asking me to pick up my phone, because Customs Corps was flagging a security override error and asking where the administrative bypass keys were. His final message, sent just 2 minutes ago at 5:58 in the morning, consisted of only 3 frantic words. "Please call me." The initial condescension and smug power Gavin had displayed in the boardroom 18 hours ago had completely evaporated. In its place was the raw, cold panic of an executive who was starting to realize he had cut the ropes holding up his own ceiling. I set the phone back down on the desk, face down, and took a quiet sip of coffee. The sun had risen, my decision was made, and the storm at Apex was only just beginning. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the situation at Apex Global Logistics had spiraled into total operational chaos. Without my manual administrative key validations and security overrides, Customs Corps had automatically locked down every incoming and outgoing freight channel. Over 40 ocean container ships were anchored offshore, unable to dock because their manifest clearance signatures were missing. More than 500 transport trucks were backed up along the highway leading into the regional port terminals, idling in traffic that stretched for miles. Port authorities were imposing automated noncompliance fines for every hour each terminal remained blocked. Inside Apex's headquarters, Gavin Thorne had called an emergency all-hands meeting in the main boardroom. The room was packed with frantic department heads, screaming regional managers, and Gavin's young tech team. The flashy digital dashboards Gavin had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to install were flashing bright red error banners across every screen. When Gavin demanded that his 25-year-old protégé bypass the security locks, the young analyst broke down in tears, admitting that no one on the current staff understood the deep source code of Customs Corps or how to bypass my personal authorization keys. At 8:15 in the morning, my phone rang again. This time, the call came directly from the boardroom speakerphone. Sitting in my new glass office on the executive floor of Summit Freight, I picked up the line and placed it on speakerphone with Eleanor Sinclair sitting across from me. "Timothy, thank God you picked up." Gavin's voice blasted through the speaker. Gone was the smug, polished voice of the arrogant executive. His tone was breathless, pitched high with sheer desperation. He said they had a massive technical glitch in Customs Corps, that the port systems were completely frozen, and that he needed me to give his tech team the master administrative override codes right now over the phone. I let a long, calm pause stretch across the line before I spoke. "Good morning, Gavin." I explained that it was not a technical glitch, but rather the security architecture doing precisely what I designed it to do when an unauthorized user attempts to process global cargo manifests without valid executive credentials. "Listen to me, Timothy," Gavin stammered, his voice cracking slightly. He said he was willing to forget the whole thing, and that if I came back to the office right now, he would honor my old contract and even give me a 5% raise. He begged me for the codes, saying they were losing millions of dollars every minute. "Gavin," I said, my voice a steady, measured, and completely devoid of anger. I reminded him that yesterday at 5 o'clock, he told me I was replaceable inventory and that anyone off the street could run my division for half my salary. I asked him why his modern artificial intelligence team could not resolve a simple clearance code if my work was as simple and worthless as he claimed. "Timothy, please." Gavin was practically begging now, his voice echoing loudly in front of his entire managerial staff. He said the board was calling him every 5 minutes, his father was online too, and the company would face catastrophic financial damages. "My institutional knowledge belonged to me, Gavin," I replied softly. "You chose to discard it. You chose to disrespect 18 years of my life. And as of 6 o'clock this morning, I am officially the Senior Vice President of Global Logistics Operations at Summit Freight. I no longer work for you, and I owe you nothing." I could hear collective gasps from the junior managers sitting in Apex's boardroom. Gavin went completely silent for 5 full seconds, absorbing the news. He whispered the name of my new employer, shocked that I had gone to their competitor. "Reality always arrives faster than you expect, Gavin," I said, repeating the exact words I had spoken to him the night before. "And by the way, 3 of Apex's largest commercial accounts have just officially canceled their contracts with your firm due to the port delays, and they have transferred their entire shipping portfolio to Summit. Have a good day." I pressed the red button and ended the call. 3 months after that fateful morning, the dust finally settled across the regional logistics sector, leaving the balance of corporate power completely transformed. The single morning of port blockages cost Apex Global Logistics over $14 million in direct penalties, delayed cargo fees, and legal settlements with international shipping lines. But the financial fine was only the beginning of their losses. Over the next 6 weeks, nearly 30% of Apex's core corporate accounts, clients who had stayed with the firm for years solely because of my flawless compliance track record, transferred their business directly to Summit Freight. When Apex's full board of directors launched an internal audit to figure out how a multi-million-dollar supply chain could collapse in less than 12 hours, the truth came out in full view. The audit exposed Gavin Thorne's total incompetence, his failure to maintain basic regulatory standards, and his systematic mistreatment of senior technical staff. It also revealed how his sudden termination of the engineering team in violation of the Warren Act, without the mandatory 60 days of notice under Title 29, Section 2101, had exposed the firm to further regulatory liabilities. To prevent a massive shareholder lawsuit, the board stripped Gavin of his title as Senior Vice President. Because his father still held clout on the board, they did not fire him outright. But his punishment was arguably worse for a man of his pride. He was demoted to a desk job as a junior regional coordinator in a small remote branch office thousands of miles away, stripped of all authority and barred from ever speaking to the press or board members again. Today, I sit in my spacious executive suite at Summit Freight, looking out over the city skyline where cargo ships move smoothly into the harbor. My new role pays me nearly double what I earned at Apex, but the money is only a small part of my peace. My daughter Lily is currently receiving the absolute best medical treatment available, fully covered by my executive care package, and her health has stabilized dramatically. My mother lives comfortably in her residence without me ever having to worry about rising monthly fees. My new team at Summit treats my 18 years of experience not as an outdated relic, but as a priceless foundation of knowledge. When I walk down the hallways here, people do not look through me or talk over me. They listen. Looking back on that Tuesday afternoon in the glass boardroom, I do not feel bitterness or malice toward Gavin Thorne. In a strange way, his arrogance was the greatest gift he could have given me. It forced me to realize what I was truly worth. Real skill shows its value in the quiet, seamless motion of things working properly. And sometimes, the absolute most powerful response you can ever give to someone who disrespects your value is simply to step back, fold your hands, and let them experience the true, exact cost of your absence.